Joining us now on the line is Major Eric Navarro, a combat veteran, served 2 tours in Iraq, and now a major in the United States Marine Corps Reserves. He wrote a book called God Willing, My Wild Ride with the New Iraqi Army. Good morning to you, Major Navarro.
Thank you. Good morning.
I want to start out before we get into the news of the moment, you wrote this book called My Wild Ride with the New Iraqi Army. When we look back now at how the United States military trained the Iraqi army and tried to stand them up as a fighting force, and we see how they sort of just melted away when the first conflicts began, what went wrong?
Well, a lot of things. We left, right? And that was the biggest problem. In my book, I point out that the mission of training the Iraqis, at first we thought it would be a way for us to train them up so that we could leave. But really, their capabilities were so weak and their national pride, I guess, so weak, we needed to stay there for generations, right? The adults that were there, they had grown up in a world of, Saddam Hussein's power, right, where they were just used to being controlled by a dictator. As soon as they got their freedom, they didn't know what to do with themselves, right? So the adults almost needed to be managed almost like children. I know that's crazy to say, right? But we also needed to focus on developing their children and their children past that. They needed to grow up in an environment.
All right. So you're on the ground level there, working with the Iraqi army. You see this. Why is it that this did not get passed up the chain to the people who made decisions?
I can't fully answer that. I will say that those of us on the ground tried to do that, and we experienced that same level of frustration where we didn't understand why it seemed common sense to everybody that worked with the Iraqis what we needed to do, which is to stay there. But then, it could be that politics got in the way, right? People wanted to leave. The American public is tired of war. They said, why are we still staying over there we were there for 9 years, right? So I think people just got tired of it, but I think the problem is America oftentimes leaves all these conflict areas thinking that we've solved the problem. And what happens is, and you're seeing it with ISIS or ISIL, is something worse can come behind it. Right? We needed to stay, project our power throughout the region, build up the Iraqis over years and years, and that's the only way we could have kept the terrorists at bay.
It appears that the president has sort of drawn a red line there around Kurdistan. That seems to be where he's going to stake his claim and make sure that the ISIS doesn't infringe on the good people, the Kurds that are there and have been fighting valiantly even while Saddam Hussein was still in power. What do you know of the Kurdish army, and what chances do they have?
Well, I know that they're strong fighters. The Peshmerga have been fighting for generations. Unlike a lot of the Shiites and Sunnis that I worked with, they were tougher mentally. They had a stiffer spine. A lot of times with the other Iraqis, we had to push them to stay and fight. So Kurdistan also has been very strong in developing almost a democracy and independent. They wanted an independent state for many years. So it makes sense to support them. They're going to fight strong. I just think that we should have never left, but B, we should be even stronger in supporting the Iraqis to defeat ISIS at all costs.
So you would be in favor of what we are hearing happen starting yesterday or maybe before, the providing of weapons to the Kurds by, we assume, the CIA?
Yes, absolutely. We shouldn't be involved in getting large numbers of our own boots on the ground. Right? I believe we have special operators there. That makes sense, right? They could do targeted raids. They could also do foreign internal defense, which is what I did, which is developing the indigenous population's military, right? But we could support them logistically, with intelligence, with drones, and with heavy airstrikes to degrade and defeat ISIS. You don't just sit there and allow a terrorist army to build up strength and spread across the region, a pivotal region like the Middle East. You have to destroy it.
It seems as though every time the president or Secretary of State John Kerry, who is doing a lot of the heavy lifting on behalf of the president with regard to the situation in Iraq, it seems like every time they start to discuss these airstrikes and any other aid that we might be given to the Kurds and other forces down there on the ground, they preface it with an adamant refusal to even consider the idea of additional U.S. troops going back into that region. Is that a smart move, just in terms of letting the enemy know politically that this is not even being considered?
I would say no. When you're playing poker, you don't tell the other person whether or not you're bluffing, right? So even if you have no intention of putting troops on the ground, why tell the enemy exactly what your plans are? This is the same thing in Afghanistan. Why would we tell the enemy when exactly we were leaving? Right? Even if that's the plan, internally we could discuss that. And we've been again in Iraq and Afghanistan for a decade now. So I understand whether or not the American public wants us to get out, but you don't tell the enemy exactly what your plans are.
Well,
then they know.
To that end, you just made the point pretty passionately that we shouldn't have left the way we left in the first place. The president responded to that criticism over the weekend. He said, listen, at best we were going to have 10,000 troops on the ground there, and the only difference it would make is this chaos would still be going on. The only difference is 10,000 American troops would be in the middle of it, and how is that a good thing? What's your response?
Well, I just don't think that would have happened. Several things. First, a lot of this happened. ISIS was able to gain some significant strength because Maliki, once we left, we had no influence on Maliki, and Maliki became very sectarian and dictatorial in his. He purged the military that I worked with purged them of many of the Sunni officers. The Sunnis didn't feel included in the government, so they had nowhere else to turn. Right? We could have influenced events if we had troops there. Okay, once we picked up and left, there was no way to influence events on the ground. That is just one positive aspect of just being there, let alone projecting power throughout the region and preventing or reducing the influence of Iran, which has been, Maliki has basically been heavily influenced by Iran. So there's all different types of ways we could boots on the ground influence. It's not just in directly engaging the enemy.
All right, so the question is, Maliki has suggested that he might use force, the troops that are loyal to him, to keep him in office. Do you think that's a possibility?
Absolutely. Every indication is that he will not go quietly. I believe the president gave a short statement yesterday to signal that he was in favor of pushing Maliki out of the way. That's a reversal of course. I think it's a wise move. It's just a question of how do we do that with the least amount of bloodshed. I think if we can get an inclusive government to bring the Sunnis back in, that will weaken ISIS's grip. We still have to destroy Baghdadi and his troops. But I will say when I was there in Iraq the second time, I was part of the surge in 2007, 2008, things had calmed down dramatically. And that was because the Sunni awakening had occurred, right? The Sunnis they basically flipped sides from the terrorists to us. And that's when things started to become more peaceful and develop into a stable democracy, right, or at least a stabilized, secure situation. That's what we have to get back to.
All right, Major Eric Navarro, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate your insight on this matter.